Our seventh tradition states that every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, passing the basket, declining outside contributions. All right. Okay, this is a weekly step meeting. We just read it. Our format is as follows. The speaker is asked to talk for 25 to 30 minutes on the step of that week, followed by discussion or questions until 7 p.m. You can find these weekly meetings on our YouTube page, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe, and share. All right. That brings us to the speaker portion of the meeting of this day of June 6th, 2022 in Doylestown, PA at the Monday night 6 p.m. Stay Alive Literature and Step Group at St. Paul's Lutheran Church. Tonight's speaker is Chris, and he will be sharing his experience on Step 3 tonight. Please help me welcome Chris.
Hey, hello, my name is Chris. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Chris.
I'm an alcoholic today as I was yesterday, and I will be tomorrow. In the spirit of things, kind of sitting here wondering while I'm sitting here sharing and chairing this meeting, I was just thinking about the last few hours, right? So, interestingly enough, I had this day was set. I had 12 o'clock. I had a lunch appointment out in Newtown, and after that, I had to go to Princeton, New Jersey at 3 p.m. to meet with a company in my space of employment. I'm an insurance consultant, and interestingly enough, and then it was scheduled at 5 o'clock. Was to meet my sponsor here. I was going to meet my sponsor in Doylestown. So we often meet we come up here at least once a week, if not twice a week. And right now I'm actually just putting together, moving forward through steps 4 through 9. So regards to that being said, like I go to Princeton, New Jersey. I go from Newtown to this scheduled appointment in Princeton, New Jersey, where the woman sent me the email, scheduled the time, and I get there at about 2:50, only to find out that she's left for the day. And so I sat there graciously and took upon the moment and sat there and spoke with the receptionist and exchanged pleasantries and made things laugh, and then I said, okay. I said, fine. I said, and I actually texted my sponsor and said, hey, look, I can meet you at 4. And he said, okay. So I started heading from Princeton, and I head all the way over. I cut through Washington Crossing, and I'm coming up, I come up the Township Line Road. And as I get the Township Line Road, he texts me and says, Chris, I am so sorry. I have an emergency. I can't make it. So now that lends to the timelines, and interestingly enough, I have good friends of mine live in Wycombe, and I haven't seen them in a while. So Township Line, and right there on Wycombe, and so I just swung over to their house, and there they were. They're two young people. They happen to be home. They work from their house, and we had an opportunity to sit down and talk for about a half hour. And I haven't seen them in about maybe 8 months or a year, and we got to kind of go back and forth. A lot of things that have been going on in my life, a lot of things going on in their life. So we got to talk about, I got to talk about my recovery to them. And in the reference of things, I just had a DUI. I just had a hearing on a DUI back on May 12th. So yesterday I celebrated 20 months of sobriety. It took almost 19 months with the backup with the pandemic to get to court. But I kind of met with them, and then so now I'm driving into Doylestown, and like, where do I go from here? So it's now like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 o'clock, and a friend of mine owns a restaurant in Doylestown, and hadn't seen him in a while, and I'm like, I knew about this meeting going on at 6 o'clock, and then actually, I intended was originally meet my sponsor, work with him for about an hour and a half, and then come over here, get a meeting, and I leave here, I go up to New Hope on a regular basis on Monday night. I attend a collective group of people, and our space has got, as I understand, in Christianity. So we kind of have a group that collects. We get together on Monday nights up in New Hope at about 7:30, whenever you arrive. So that being said, nothing I had planned today was really scheduled. Everything I planned didn't come to fruition, right? So, isn't that kind of in the space, we talk about this third step, right? We talk about where we are in this recovery. And in light of things, I often share to the effects is like this, man. For me, just for me, you can only recover from alcoholism you can only recover from alcoholism by learning about alcoholism, and you cannot basically get sober drinking. So, there's an emphasis to the effects is like, you have to go through your program of recovery sober. You have to learn everything about this perspective on things, like to the certain effects, like, I'm sure you heard the analogy of the drunken horse thief, right? Is that something here has anyone heard before? And essentially, I referred to as a wretched soul. I was a drunken, wretched soul. And when you've taken the drink out of my hands, what was I left with? A lot of wretchedness, and imply, that is the nature of my condition, my circumstances, as it relates to, my story, my reaching the point of unreasonable, my, circumstances due to, drinking alcohol for 50, I don't know how many years. I picked up a drink at a very young age, and we were talking about this. I came into AA first time in 1989. I came into AA when I was 24 years old. I had a DUI in 1986, and as a series of events unfolded, on July the 4th, 1989, I attended my first AA meeting down at the Stepping Stones in Northeast Philadelphia, and I would pick up a drink 6 weeks later and go back to the meeting the next day and stay sober to 2007. So I would stay sober for 2007. In that timeline, I would, putting down a drink for a person 24 years old afforded me. Okay, it just afforded me the opportunity to get back into the swing of things, right? Get back into the mainstream of life. And that the point I'm trying to say is like I came in and I stayed in AA for actively about 6, 7, 8 years, about 7+ years. To a certain degree, was I look back on it, I was really, really accomplished at doing two-stepping. I really at that time, and some of the things I read in the book back then to this effect, and this is accurate saying, but like if you had if you had problems as a direct result of your drinking, you're probably alcoholic. When I was 24 years old, I had a lot of problems as a direct result of my drinking, the DUI being one of them. I was living in my mother's basement, circumstances where, I wasn't working. I was the youngest of 6, and I had a lot of pressure on my brothers and sisters to tell my mom, like, you got to do something. You got to kick them out. And that's really the extent of how I landed in AA. That was really the extent of my problems. And, that's important as you look at the third step, as we kind of go into the third step in a moment. I'll get into that. But regards to, how I was living my life, and I came into AA, and I came in with all good intentions, and I stayed in AA and did a lot of activities, did a lot of work on, staying sober, had a great time. I mean, I can never look back. AA was a street corner I always wanted to hang out in. I was active. We started the first Mummer Brigade in AA. We were called the 12-Steppers. I can show you pictures afterwards. I went to conferences. I went to young people's conferences in Hawaii. I got sober. My sister got sober 6 months later. She's 33 years sober. My best friend got sober 6 months later. He's 33 years sober. I got sober, and like I said, AA, you kind of putting down a drink and just kind of staying in AA. And we were talking about that. It was a different time period. I really felt like it was a different time period. But I walked away from AA in like 1998 or so, and I stayed sober for almost 10 years without attending meetings, without drinking. And there's a part in the book I just read. I was just reading more about alcoholism. It specifically talks about that. Talks about going through a lengthy period of time without a drink. And I share this because I actually, you probably know him. His name's Markham from outside of Lambertville, New Jersey. big heavyset guy, looks like Grizzly Adams, and he lives in Hawaii. In November, December, January, February. I think he's a big guy. He likes Ron a lot. And the summer of last year, the storyline that goes with this is I was here at this meeting, and I was looking for a guy to become my sponsor on a hot summer night. And I walked, and the meeting was over, and it was like about, so it was going on 10 o'clock, and I go looking for the person that and someone told me he was already outside getting a cigarette. So I walked outside the front here, and I can't see anybody. And in the back, behind me, in a Hawaiian language, a voice came out, and I turned around, and there was this big guy, looked like Grizzly Adams, extra large, filling out in a Hawaiian shirt. And I would sit there and talk to him. And it is really important why I say this, because they talk about it more about alcoholism and identifying the different types of drinkers. And he kind of led me to an understanding, okay, of importance to me, because he referred to a terminology known as dipsomania. And many people are not familiar with dipsomania because it's a medical term that's no longer used. But essentially, if you Google it, and you'll see that it's under the medical terminology, it talks about the alcoholic, okay, who is basically through the allergy, through the phenomenon craving, abuses alcohol, and there is periods of time that the alcoholic there's periods of time of sobriety. And that would be by means my kind of like referred to as like what's important. And I think it talks about this and actually like in the doctor's opinion, or I'm trying to think in one, like the doctor's opinion talks about the type of alcoholic. And I think it's imperative to understand like how I refer to like how I got in here. Like I don't compare myself to other people. Like that gentleman like who was telling me this, when he walked into his detox, he blew a 4.0 going into a detox, and he lived on a daily basis with a 1.5 BAC level, okay? And he was explaining his alcoholism, his drinking, how he woke up in the morning, how he had to drink. He just had to drink to essentially to throw up so he could feel right, and that was not my kind of drinking. That was not how I had done my drinking, okay, when I came into AA. And it was important to me to understand my stories. A lot of times as you come into AA meetings, you hear other people's story, and sometimes people tend to have identification, and they try to basically be like other people. They'll be in meetings, and sometimes you'll go to a meeting, like you were saying, some meetings that they talk about like just not drinking, and you hear this kind of like it's like the wave at sport games. You ever see the wave at sport games? Everyone starts doing the same thing, and then everyone starts repeating and sounding like the same person. And it was very important for me to understand, like and he was very critical matter, that he brought me down this path for me to understand what my story was and how alcohol was for me. And I was a chronic blackout drinker so I picked up a drink, and I just want to end with this. I picked up a drink again in June of 2007, and I was sober for 18 years. But I didn't go to AA for like almost 9 years. And as I said, I have all these relationships in AA. I have a lot of people that I knew with 30 years, 35 years, 40 years, and I never came back to AA. And there's and that implies like you're talking about taking my will. So, I just wanted to kind of share that with you, just kind of looking at my story, and I came back in on it as a result of a DUI. And I look back on that, and as DUI, the terminology says like decisions under the influences. And I spent almost a long period of time making decisions under the influences. And most of those influences, as a direct result, being affected because being of nature untreated alcoholism. I made a lot of decisions during that period of 10 years that were really alcoholic, okay? Untreated alcoholism for 18 years. So I just kind of I just wanted to express that, the importance. And when I came back to when I fell in through the grace of God, when I was able to come back in and get sober, somewhere along the lines, I'd soon in that time span, almost about like 5-6 weeks into it, I knew that I just can't, got sober enough to know that I looked back on how I used to be, and I walked away, and I don't even talk about those 18 years anymore, because I don't look at that time period by virtually, I look at it as adverse. I don't look at it of being of nature. I wasn't in recovery. So it's really important to me that I express that. So going back to the third step, I mean, going into this third step experience, and like I was saying, like sometimes you got to basically, as I recover from alcoholism, basically you have to know about alcoholism. And most recently, in this space, as I kind of go through the last year, due to circumstances, like a lot of the situation as a direct result of my, being out there for 13 years, I lost, that in that space, my drinking adversely affected a lot of people. I haven't seen my children since Christmas of 2020. And the situation being is, I kind of recall, this is like looking at the second and third step. Looking at the second and third step. So I kind of admit that I'm powerless over alcohol. That being said, and the most important aspect is is on the right side of that hyphen is my life has become unmanageable. To me, that's essentially the disease nature, the unmanageability of my life, and then coming to believe that a power greater than myself is going to restore me to sanity. And I kind of look at it, from a perspective, of nature, like as you read in the book, it talks about it here in the we agnostic. To the untenth degree, you can kind of just go almost anywhere throughout this book here, and find that to the point of interestingly enough, that essentially where the insanity of the illness comes from, and it says circumstances being is that the barriers that we have, right, essentially. The barriers happens to be of our own self-will, stops us from this power that's here to essentially to lead us into a forward motion of basically of understanding the condition that we have, and in that space is that allows you to understand that your unmanageability refers to the physical and mental. The mental component of this disease, and that the only remedy to that being said is to overcome yourself and essentially come to believe in the spiritual practices of the program. So that leads to this third step, that I'm making a decision. And I guess we all know about the analogy too out there, right? The saying about the three frogs, right? The three frogs, okay, and essentially three frogs are on a log. And one of them makes a decision. One of them has a thought about, jumping in the water. How many frogs are left in the water? 3. Okay, so that's a kind of key. Is like you understand, like it's a decision that we make. It's a really important component. Is that we make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to care of God. And the reason I bring this up is because I mentioned to the effect that I came into AA as a direct result. I came in as my, as a direct result of the progression of my illness, and I had essentially a divorce was being set up already. I had a divorce that was happening. I got a DUI on October 2nd, 2020, and I fell into the doors of AA in October 3rd, 4th, 5th, October 5th, I came in here to this meeting right here. My first meeting I came back to AA was right here on October 5th, 2020. And a friend of mine brought me here. And when that happened, I kind of had, to this point, like, I got sober to a certain degree. I stayed sober. And when I woke up, I came out of that storm shelter, and I looked around and saw, like a tsunami had pretty much just been, had been pretty much put a wreckage on my life. I was in a process of, being, filing for divorce, had a DUI, had 2 legal cases going on, completely unemployable, lost my insurance practice that I once had. I lost everything. I was completely of nature. I was, with only really through the grace of God and no exception, I was completely, basically, I was only about one breath away from being homeless. And that's how I came into AA. And that being said, like, I first came into AA, and I look at that, and as time went on, so almost about like within 4 or 5 weeks, Ricky D became my first sponsor, and within 4 or 5 weeks, I was pretty much already working through steps 1, 2, 3, and we were working feverishly through 1, 2, 3, and we would basically do a 4-step, and I did a 4-step to the best of my ability at that time. And that lends us to this point when I was somewhere about 14, 15 months sober. And as much as I did the best of my ability, as I like to refer to, I did as much as I could at that time in my first 90 days. And then I continued to stay sober, and I went into a rehab. I went into a rehab sober, okay? And when I went into Karen Foundation sober, I actually continued to do extensive work. And I did another 4-step. Okay, and I did another 4th and 5th step. I did the most I could at that time. And I thought that was a nature. As time went on, I still find myself in a space where this 3rd step is the most critical step in recovery. It's to me, it is the linchpin of going forward in recovery. As it applies, like I was going through, as I mentioned, like last time I saw my children, I was just about a week shy of 90 days. And I basically hadn't seen, and I saw them, it was a Christmas, and it was involved with my ex-wife, and the circumstances where divorce filing was going on. And, so I kind of, that moment, unfortunately, I have not seen them. And a lot went on in 2021. My oldest daughter graduated high school, so she went through her senior year. And did not participate in any of the events associated with senior year in high school. And that was a really, really understanding, painful time. So you're going to talk about making a decision to turn your will and your life over to care of God. And there led, this opportunity, okay, as I would like to say, again, the only way you're going to recover from alcoholism is knowing about alcoholism, right? You can't recover from alcoholism drinking. And that gave them the opportunity to understand that, the path that I had to take. And I happened to be attending the next Christmas. I actually took off I have a brother with 18 years sober down in Florida. And I was embracing for the holidays, right? So, and down Florida, I learned this terminology known as the Bermuda Triangle of recovery. And that's Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. You're talking about a lot of pain. And I was, and I was embracing for impact for Thanksgiving, attending a lot of AA meetings, staying close, staying in the center of AA. And I was dealing with a lot of, pain that's associated with, of reference, of my own self-will. And I came home Thanksgiving night, and I turned on the computer, and I saw that Frontier had a Black Friday sale. And I had been down Florida before sober with my brother earlier in the year, and I basically called him up immediately, and I said, "Hey, dude, can I come down?" And he said, "Sure." And I got a ticket to go down Florida on December 22nd. And I flew down Florida and spent 2 weeks because I wasn't going to be able to deal with the situation staying around up here in the north. And that kind of led to this moment. I went to these meetings, and AA was great down there. I was down there for 2 weeks. I went to 13 meetings, and my brother's very active in AA, and we did a lot of, and as I was there, and people were extending themselves to a point. It was just beyond my anything. It was just beyond my expectations. And I went to meetings, and I was going through a lot of pain, and I was making a lot of meetings, and I stood and I shared in the meetings frequently, and a man turned around and he said something to this effect. He said to the effect, like, I shared in the meeting about me, about this and about that, and more about me. And he turned around and said to this effect, he said at the end, and I know he was talking to me, and he says, we not only make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God, but we also make a decision to turn over the wills and lives of our children over to the care of God. That we make a decision to turn the will and life of our attorneys over to the care of God. We make a decision to turn the judges, because I'm dealing with 2 legal cases that are wide open, I don't know what the outcomes are going to be. I'm all feared up, and I'm trying to make it, and that being said, and I'm trying to make it happen myself. So, that became the most enlightened period of time in my sobriety, where this sentiment was I was able to essentially go into a space of understanding, what God's will was for me. It was the entry level into understanding about what God's will. And I say that because I just say about my own recovery. Everybody has, we all have this common denominator. We're powerless over alcohol, and I think right there, that's a major common space that we all share as a result of our alcoholism. But I think it does we do take our own kind of, due to our own backgrounds, what we believe in, we take a path, and we kind of work through these 12 simple steps. But in the spirit of things, it takes on, it's not like there's any reference, there isn't any timelines. And that third step experience that I had in Christmas of 2021 really led me to see the beauty that's behind basically letting go and letting God be in your life. And then you can understand, to the certain degree, I haven't seen my children. I haven't seen my children since, right? I haven't seen them since. I don't hear from them. I go to great measures. But that doesn't mean that I'm not better for the experience. I know that I'm better for the experience. I know that inside me that I am healing, and that the circumstances, that all the things that are going on outside of me are essentially just the world. It's just time. It's just the life that we live, and that is the reference is that the thing is that allows me to, understand about, to a point of interest is the only thing that I need to do is I just need to continually work on my treatment, my program, which is associated with AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. So I don't know if I really covered the third step in all its glory, because it is I think it is a linchpin of our sobriety. I think it leads us to, our healing process through 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. I've struggled with it. I've struggled with 8 and 9 really a lot. There's a lot of things I'm not willing to give up. There's people out there I'm not willing to say, make amends to at this juncture. And that's the reason I went back into the fourth step to kind of really make through the progress. And you could say in so many words, I'm doing my fourth step, but I just think I'm just doing my fourth step. It just takes time. All this takes time. It doesn't happen to the extent, whereas you don't go from 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 to 9, and all of a sudden you're kind of right, towards that light. You're going towards the light, what I'm saying. But my experience is that in the third step lies the really, if you get into it, and I didn't really get into it, talking about really what separates us from being alcoholic or being a person of nature, okay, that doesn't have alcoholism. It goes like this. I can go on and on and on. Someone told me, if you go more about alcoholism, but someone told me about this part. It says when you wake up every morning, it took me a little while to get understanding about asking God in the morning to keep you sober. This was something I have always had a relationship with God as I understood Him. But I always said to a certain degree, and I wake up in the morning and I go into a space of kind of solitude and meditation and prayer. But a person recently said to this effect, he says, the reason that we ask God to keep us sober is that when other people wake up, they don't think of drinking. They have their time and their prayer and their communion with God to start their day, but they're not alcoholic. They don't think of drinking. And that's the reason we ask God to keep us sober, because we happen to be alcoholic. And like I said, I'm alcoholic today as I was yesterday, and I will be tomorrow. And simply just kind of understanding that relationship with God as I understand them, implies to the point is that, the reason I ask God in the morning to keep me sober is because I'm an alcoholic. That's all I got to share. There you go.
Thanks, man. All right. Please limit your sharing to 3 minutes. And please keep your shares related to the step. If you feel like drinking, or if you had a drink today, please see me or speak to someone after the meeting. We ask that you please refrain from the use of profanity. We are in a church and on a spiritual journey. All right, so we'll open it up.